The fluorescent lights of Henderson's grocery hummed overhead as Marcus Cole pushed his cart down the cereal aisle, his mind running through the list his daughter had texted him that morning. Milk, eggs, bread, the organic granola she insisted on, even though it cost twice as much as the regular kind. He smiled slightly, remembering when she used to beg for the sugary stuff with the cartoon characters on the box. Now she was 17, worried about nutrition labels and college applications. Time moved too fast. Marcus was 52 years old, retired from the Navy after 24 years of service, the last 12 as a SEAL. His body carried the evidence of those years, a slight limp in his left leg from a training accident in Coronado, scars that mapped missions he'd never speak about, and hands that still remembered how to do things he hoped he'd never have to do again. He joined the Navy at 18, fresh out of high school, desperate to escape the small town in Ohio where nothing ever happened and nothing ever would. His father had been a factory worker, his mother a school secretary. Good people, hard-working people, but people who had never seen the world beyond their county line. Marcus had wanted more. He'd wanted to matter. The SEALs had given him that. 24 years of mattering, of making a difference, of being part of something larger than himself. He'd served in places whose names were still classified, had done things that would never appear in any history book. He'd lost friends, too many friends, and had learned to carry that weight without letting it crush him. His wife, Elena, had been his anchor through all of it. A nurse he'd met at a military hospital in Germany. She'd understood the life in a way civilians never could. She'd raised Maya mostly alone during his deployments, had held their family together through absences that stretched into months, had welcomed him home every time with the same fierce love that had drawn him to her in the first place. When the cancer came, it came fast. 6 months from diagnosis to the end, Marcus had been by her side for every moment of it, had held her hand as she slipped away, had promised her he would take care of their daughter. That was 5 years ago. Some days it felt like yesterday. Some days it felt like a lifetime. These days his battles were smaller. Getting his daughter to text him back, figuring out what to make for dinner, learning to sleep through the night without waking at every sound. Civilian life hadn't come easy. After the first few months of retirement, Marcus had found himself restless, purposeless, a weapon with no war to fight. He'd tried golf, hated it, tried fishing, too quiet, tried volunteering at the VA hospital, which had helped some, but the faces of the young men and women there, broken in ways that didn't always show, had brought back too many memories. Eventually, he'd settled into a routine. Morning runs, breakfast with Maya when she wasn't rushing off to school, errands, chores, the mundane maintenance of a life that no longer involved life or death stakes. He'd learned to appreciate the boredom, even if he'd never fully embrace it. His therapist, yes, he saw a therapist, something he never would have admitted to in his younger years, said he was making progress, learning to live without the adrenaline, learning to be present instead of always scanning for threats. Most days he believed her. He reached for a box of oatmeal when he heard it. A small voice, barely above a whisper, trembling with something that made every instinct in Marcus's body snap to attention. "He's not my dad." Marcus turned slowly, keeping his movements casual. In the adjacent aisle, visible through a gap in the shelves, stood a man in his 40s with slicked back hair and an expensive watch. Next to him was a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with sandy hair and eyes that were too old for his face. The boy wasn't looking at the man. He was looking directly at Marcus, his small hand gripping the edge of a shopping cart, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "He's not my dad," the boy whispered again, his lips barely moving. "Please." The man with the slicked-back hair put a hand on the boy's shoulder, and Marcus watched the child flinch, a micro-movement, barely perceptible but unmistakable to someone who had spent decades reading body language in life-or-death situations. "Come on, buddy," the man said, his voice friendly, too friendly, the kind of friendly that was practiced in front of mirrors. "Let's go find those cookies you wanted." The boy's eyes stayed locked on Marcus. In them, Marcus saw something he recognized. He'd seen it in the eyes of hostages, of prisoners, of people who had given up hope, and then suddenly, impossibly, found a reason to hold on. Marcus had been grocery shopping. He'd been thinking about granola and college applications, and whether he should grill chicken or salmon for dinner. Now he was thinking about something else entirely. He abandoned his cart and walked to the end of the aisle, timing it so he emerged just as the man and boy were passing. He made it look accidental, a near collision that forced them to stop. "Sorry about that," Marcus said, his voice easy, his smile disarming. "Wasn't watching where I was going." The man's smile flickered just for a moment. "No problem." Marcus looked down at the boy, keeping his expression warm. "Hey there, buddy. That's a cool dinosaur on your shirt. What's your name?" The boy's mouth opened, but the man answered first. "He's shy. Come on, son. We need to get going." Son. The word hung in the air like a wrong note in a familiar song. "I'm Marcus," Marcus said, still looking at the boy. "I have a daughter about your age. Well, she used to be about your age. Now she's practically grown up. What grade are you in?" "Second," the boy whispered. "Tyler, we need to go," the man said, his grip tightening on the boy's shoulder. "Your mom's waiting." Tyler. The boy's name was Tyler. Marcus noticed the man hadn't given his own name. He noticed the way Tyler's shoulders hunched when the man touched him. He noticed the slight tremor in the boy's lower lip, the way his eyes kept darting toward the exit. 24 years in the Navy, 12 as a SEAL. Marcus had learned to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct he had was screaming that something was very, very wrong. "You know what?" Marcus said, pulling out his phone. "I think I dropped my wallet back there. Would you mind waiting just a second? I'd hate to hold up the line while I go looking for it." He didn't wait for an answer. He walked back down the aisle, phone already to his ear. 911, what's your emergency?" "My name is Marcus Cole. I'm at Henderson's Grocery on 5th Street. I need police here immediately. I believe a child is in danger. Male subject, mid-40s, grey jacket, with a young boy named Tyler, approximately 7 years old. The child just told me the man is not his father and asked for help. Sir, can you describe? I'm a retired Navy SEAL. I'm not going to let them leave this store. Get someone here now." He hung up and walked back toward the front of the store, his pace unhurried but purposeful. The man and Tyler were in line at the checkout, the man's hand still clamped on the boy's shoulder. Marcus positioned himself near the exit, pretending to examine a display of seasonal candy. From here, he could see both the checkout line and the doors. If the man tried to leave with Tyler, he'd have to go through Marcus. The man seemed to sense something was wrong. His movements became quicker, more agitated. He glanced toward the exit, toward Marcus, back to the cashier. "Actually," the man said, "we're in a hurry. We'll come back for this later." He started pulling Tyler toward the door. Marcus stepped into his path. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice tight. "Sorry," Marcus said, not moving. "Just waiting for my wife. She's always losing me in these places." The man tried to step around him. Marcus mirrored the movement, blocking him again. "Sir, I need to get by." "In a minute. I think she's coming now." Tyler was staring up at Marcus, hope and fear warring in his eyes. His small hand reached out, almost touching Marcus's jacket. "Please," he whispered, "I want to go home, my real home, with my mom." The man's face changed. The friendly mask slipped, revealing something cold underneath. "Tyler, stop it. We talked about this." "He's lying," Tyler said, his voice getting louder now. "He took me from the park. I don't know him. Please, please help me." The man lunged for the door, dragging Tyler with him. Marcus moved faster, not attacking, not touching, but positioning his body so the man couldn't get through without going through him. "You need to stop," Marcus said, his voice the calm, commanding tone he'd used in 100 crisis situations. "The police are on their way. It's over. Get out of my way. This is a family matter." Tyler says different. He's confused. He has behavioral problems. "I'm his stepfather." "Then you won't mind waiting for the police to verify that?" The man's eyes darted around the store. Other customers had stopped shopping, were staring, some pulling out phones to record. A manager was hurrying toward them. "Is there a problem here?" the manager asked. "No problem," the man said, his voice strained. "Just a misunderstanding. This child says this man is not his father and that he was taken from a park," Marcus said clearly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I've called the police. No one is leaving until they arrive." The man's face contorted. For a moment, Marcus thought he might try to run, might abandon Tyler and bolt. But the sound of sirens cut through the tension, growing louder, closer. 2 police cars pulled up outside. Officers entered the store, hands on their holsters. "What's going on here?" the first officer asked. Marcus stepped back slightly but kept his eyes on the man. "This boy told me he was taken from a park and that this man is not his father. The boy's name is Tyler." The officer looked at Tyler, then at the man. "Sir, can I see some identification?" "This is ridiculous. I'm his stepfather. We had an argument, that's all." "Kids say crazy things." "Tyler," the officer said, kneeling down to the boy's level, "can you tell me what's happening?" Tyler burst into tears. Not the angry tears of a tantrum, but the gasping, shuddering sobs of relief. "I was at the park with my mom," he choked out. "He came and said my mom was sick and I had to come with him, but my mom wasn't sick, and then he wouldn't let me call her. And he said if I told anyone he'd hurt her. He said..." The boy couldn't continue, overcome by sobs. The officer's expression hardened. She looked at the man. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us." "You can't do this. I have rights." "Sir, now." 2 more officers moved in, securing the man, while a third gently led Tyler away from the commotion. The boy looked back at Marcus one more time, his eyes filled with tears, and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Marcus nodded, a silent acknowledgement. He'd been trained not to show emotion in crisis situations, to maintain composure no matter what. But standing there, watching the officers lead the man away while another comforted the traumatized child, he felt something crack in his chest. This wasn't a mission. This wasn't enemy territory. This was his hometown, his grocery store, the place where he bought milk and eggs and his daughter's overpriced granola. And a child had been in danger, right here, right now, in broad daylight. The man was handcuffed and led to a patrol car. Tyler was wrapped in a blanket by a female officer who spoke to him softly while another called for Child Protective Services. Marcus stood off to the side, the adrenaline slowly draining from his body. His hands were shaking slightly. They always did after. Even after 24 years, the body still remembered fear. An officer approached him. "Sir, you're Marcus Cole." "That's right. We're going to need you to come to the station and give a statement. But first..." The officer paused, something like respect in his eyes. "How did you know?" Marcus looked at Tyler, who was being gently led to a patrol car, the blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. The boy looked back just for a moment and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." "I didn't know," Marcus said. "He told me. He was brave enough to ask for help. I just listened." The police station was bright and busy, phones ringing and keyboards clicking and voices overlapping in the controlled chaos of a busy night. Marcus sat in a hard plastic chair, waiting to give his statement, his mind replaying the events of the evening. Around him, the station hummed with activity. Officers typed reports, suspects were processed, and the endless cycle of human drama played out in all its mundane complexity. Marcus had been in secure facilities around the world, had sat in briefing rooms planning operations that would never be acknowledged, but there was something different about a local police station, something grounded, real. He watched a young officer struggle with a jammed printer, saw a detective consoling a crying woman in the corner, noticed the coffee maker that had clearly seen better days, the bulletin board covered with wanted posters and community announcements, the motivational poster someone had hung on the wall, a cat dangling from a branch with the caption, "Hang in there." Normal life. This was normal life for these people. Every day they saw the worst of humanity and somehow kept going. No medals, no recognition, just the work itself. Marcus found himself respecting them in a way he hadn't expected. He'd called his daughter to let her know he'd be late. She'd wanted to know everything, had been horrified and impressed and worried all at once. "Dad, you could have been hurt. What if that guy had a weapon?" He didn't. But what if he had? Marcus didn't have a good answer for that. The truth was, he hadn't thought about it. He'd seen a child in danger, and he'd acted. That was what he'd trained for, what he'd spent his life doing. The calculation of risk hadn't entered into it. Maybe that made him reckless. Maybe it made him a liability. Or maybe, after years of following orders, of operating in the grey spaces where right and wrong blurred together, it felt good to do something that was unambiguously right. "Mr. Cole." He looked up. A woman in her 30s stood before him, her brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. She was clutching a little boy's hand. "Tyler." "I'm Rachel Myers," she said, her voice breaking. "Tyler's mom. I don't know how to. I can't even—" She dissolved into tears, pulling Tyler close. Marcus stood, uncomfortable with the emotion, but unable to walk away from it. "I'm just glad I was there." "He took him right from the playground," Rachel said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I turned around for 1 second to talk to another mom, and when I turned back, Tyler was gone. And then this man, I'd never seen him before in my life, he just took my baby. The police said he's done this before," Tyler said quietly, "with other kids, but they got away." Marcus felt his stomach turn. Other kids. Tyler might not have been so lucky. "How did you know?" Rachel asked. "How did you know something was wrong?" "He told me," Marcus said simply. "Tyler was brave enough to ask for help. That takes courage." Rachel looked down at her son, fresh tears spilling. "You're the bravest boy I know. You know that?" Tyler leaned into his mother. "The man at the store was brave too. He didn't let us leave, even when the bad man tried to push past." Rachel looked at Marcus with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You saved my son's life. I will never be able to repay that. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything." She took a shaky breath. "Do you have children, Mr. Cole?" "A daughter, 17. "Then you understand. What you did. What you risked." She shook her head. "I don't know how to live in a world where strangers take children from playgrounds, but I know how to live in a world where other strangers step up to stop them. You gave me that. You gave Tyler that." Marcus didn't know what to say. He'd received commendations before, medals and ribbons and formal recognition for actions that had to stay classified. But this felt different. This wasn't a mission or an objective or a strategic goal. This was a mother holding her son in a police station, both of them alive and together, because he'd happened to be in the right place at the right time. "I need to go give my statement," he said. "But take care of him. He's a good kid." "Thank you," Rachel whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The drive home was quiet. Marcus kept the radio off, letting the silence wrap around him like a blanket. His hands had stopped shaking, but his mind was still racing. The streets of his neighborhood looked different now somehow. The same houses, the same lampposts, the same cars parked in the same driveways. But the shadows seemed deeper, the spaces between the lights more ominous. He knew it was just his mind processing the trauma, reframing the familiar through the lens of what he'd just experienced. But knowing didn't make it less real. He thought about all the times he'd driven these streets, oblivious. All the morning runs, all the trips to the grocery store, all the mundane errands of everyday life. How many children had been in danger within a few miles of where he lived? How many predators walked these same sidewalks, shopped in these same stores, blended into the fabric of the community like wolves in sheep's clothing? It was a dangerous line of thinking, he knew, the kind of hypervigilance that could consume you if you let it. His therapist had warned him about this, about the temptation to see threats everywhere, to treat every stranger as a potential enemy. But Tyler had been a real threat. Tyler had been a child in danger, right there in the grocery store, surrounded by dozens of people who hadn't noticed anything wrong. He thought about all the missions, all the operations, all the things he'd done in the name of duty and country. He thought about the people he'd saved and the people he couldn't. He thought about the years of training that had prepared him for violence, and how tonight the most important thing he'd done was simply stand still. When he pulled into his driveway, the lights were on in the living room. His daughter Maya was waiting on the porch. She ran to him before he even got out of the car, throwing her arms around him in a hug that nearly knocked him off balance. "You're okay," she said into his shoulder. "I'm okay. I was so worried. I kept thinking about what could have happened. Nothing happened. I'm fine." "The boy's fine. Everyone's fine." Maya pulled back, looking at him with eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. His late wife, gone 5 years now from a cancer that had taken her too fast for anyone to prepare. "You're a hero," Maya said. "I'm just a guy who was buying groceries." "No." Maya's voice was firm. "You're a hero, and I'm proud of you. Mom would be proud of you." Marcus felt something crack in his chest, something he'd been holding together for a long time. He pulled his daughter into another hug and held on tight. "I'm proud of you too," he said. Every single day. They stood there in the driveway for a long moment, father and daughter, the night quiet around them. Finally, Maya stepped back. "I ordered pizza," she said. "Since you never got the groceries." Marcus laughed, actually laughed for the first time all night. "Pizza sounds perfect." They walked inside together, leaving the darkness behind. The news broke the next morning. Marcus woke to his phone buzzing incessantly, notifications piling up like leaves in autumn. Someone at the grocery store had recorded the confrontation and posted it online. Within hours, it had gone viral. Retired Navy SEAL saves kidnapped boy at grocery store, hero vet stops, child predator in dramatic confrontation, child whispers, "He's not my dad. What happened next will restore your faith in humanity." The video had been viewed millions of times already. Comments poured in from around the world. Praise, gratitude, people sharing their own stories of times they wished someone had stepped in, times someone had, times they themselves had acted or failed to act. Marcus watched the video once, then turned off his phone. He didn't recognize himself in the footage. The man on the screen looked calm, controlled, almost casual as he blocked the exit and waited for the police to arrive. But Marcus remembered the racing of his heart, the calculation of risks, the terrifying moment when the man had lunged for the door and Marcus had had to decide whether to physically intervene. He remembered being scared. Not for himself, he'd long since made peace with his own mortality, but for the boy, for what might happen if he failed, for the weight of responsibility that had settled on his shoulders the moment Tyler had whispered those 3 words. "He's not my dad." Marcus sat at his kitchen table, coffee growing cold in his mug, scrolling through the headlines with a mixture of disbelief and discomfort. He'd never wanted attention. In his line of work, attention could get you killed. "Dad, you're famous," Maya said, dropping into the chair across from him. "Like actually famous. There's a hashtag and everything." "I don't want to be famous." "Too bad. Channel 7 called, and Channel 9, and some podcast. And the mayor's office." "The mayor? Apparently, they want to give you some kind of award." Marcus set down his phone and rubbed his face with his hands. "I just want to eat breakfast." "You can't hide from this, Dad. What you did was incredible. People need to see that there are still good people in the world. There are plenty of good people. I'm not special." Maya reached across the table and took his hand. "You are, though. You've always been. You just don't see it." Marcus thought about Rachel Myers, about the way she'd held her son like she'd never let go again. He thought about Tyler, about the courage it had taken for a 7-year-old to ask a stranger for help. He thought about all the children who hadn't been so lucky, all the stories that didn't have happy endings. "What happened to the man?" he asked. "The one who took Tyler." Maya pulled up something on her phone. "His name is Gerald Whitmore, 44 years old. He has a record, prior charges for child endangerment in 2 other states. Cases were dropped because the children were too traumatized to testify." Marcus's jaw tightened. So he's done this before, multiple times, but they could never make anything stick. Until now. Until now. Because a little boy had been brave enough to speak up, and because Marcus had been paying attention. There's something else, Maya said, her voice softer now. The police are looking into whether he's connected to other missing children cases, cold cases. They think... She stopped, swallowed hard. They think there might be other kids. Marcus felt the familiar cold settle into his bones, the cold of a mission, of a purpose, of something that needed to be done. "What are you thinking?" Maya asked, watching him carefully. "I'm thinking I need to talk to the police again." The next few weeks were a blur. Marcus found himself pulled into the investigation in ways he'd never expected. The police had questions about his training, about his instincts, about the moment when he'd known something was wrong. But more than that, they wanted his help. Detective Sarah Chen was the lead on the case. She was sharp, dedicated, and haunted by the growing realization that Gerald Whitmore might be responsible for crimes far beyond what they'd initially suspected. "We've found connections to 6 other cases," she told Marcus during one of their meetings at the station. 6 children who went missing over the past decade, similar circumstances, taken from parks, playgrounds, public places. Parents who turned their backs for just a moment. How many were found? Detective Chen's silence was answer enough. "We think Whitmore had help," she continued. "A network. People who helped him move, who provided cover, who looked the other way. We're trying to untangle it, but it's slow going. He's not talking." Of course he's not. But Tyler's testimony is solid. And the grocery store footage. That's going to put him away for a long time. What you did, Mr. Cole, you didn't just save that boy. You cracked this whole thing open. Marcus didn't feel like he'd cracked anything. He felt like he'd stumbled onto something terrible. Something that had been lurking in the shadows of his community for years, while everyone went about their lives, oblivious. "What can I do?" he asked. Detective Chen looked at him appraisingly. "Honestly, you've done more than enough. Go home. Be with your daughter. Let us handle the rest." But Marcus couldn't let it go. He'd spent too many years on missions to walk away in the middle of one. The nightmares started a few days after the incident. They weren't about Tyler or Gerald Whitmore. They were about the children who hadn't been so lucky. The ones who had been taken and never found, the ones whose faces appeared on milk cartons and highway billboards and eventually faded from memory as months turned to years. Marcus would wake at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, images of children's faces swimming in his vision. He'd get up, make coffee and sit in the dark kitchen until dawn, thinking. His therapist called it survivor's guilt by proxy. The knowledge that while Tyler was safe at home with his mother, there were other children out there, other parents living the nightmare Rachel Myers had almost lived. "You can't save everyone," the therapist said during one of their sessions. "That's not your responsibility. Whose responsibility is it then? Society's, the police, the justice system, the community. And if they fail..." The therapist had no good answer for that. So Marcus started quietly, using skills he'd honed over decades. He talked to neighbors near the parks where children had gone missing. He reviewed public records, looking for patterns. He reached out to old contacts, former SEALs, intelligence officers, people who knew how to find what didn't want to be found. He learned about the underground networks that traded in human misery, the code words, the encrypted communications, the layers of protection that kept the predators safe and the victims silent. It was a world that existed parallel to the normal world, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking. Marcus started looking, and slowly, piece by piece, a picture began to emerge. Gerald Whitmore wasn't a lone wolf. He was part of a network that spanned multiple states, a loose organization of predators who protected each other, shared information, and operated in the spaces between jurisdictions where things fell through the cracks. The thought of it made Marcus sick, but it also made him determined. One evening, about 3 weeks after the grocery store incident, Marcus sat in his living room, surrounded by papers and notes. Maya had gone to bed hours ago, but he couldn't sleep. There was something he was missing, some connection he couldn't quite see. His phone rang, unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Cole?" The voice was female, hesitant. "My name is Jennifer Walsh. You don't know me, but I need to talk to you about Gerald Whitmore." Marcus sat up straighter. "I'm listening. Not on the phone. Can we meet somewhere public? I have information that could help. But I'm scared, Mr. Cole. These people, they're everywhere. I thought I was safe, but after what you did at that grocery store, after I saw the news, I can't stay quiet anymore." They agreed to meet the next morning at a coffee shop downtown. Marcus arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of both entrances. Old habits. The coffee shop was called The Daily Grind, a small independent place that had somehow survived the onslaught of chain stores. Marcus ordered black coffee and a blueberry muffin he had no intention of eating, settling into his seat with the practiced casualness of someone who was anything but casual. He watched the door, cataloguing everyone who entered. A young couple, clearly in love, giggling over some private joke. A businessman in a rumpled suit, barking orders into his phone. An elderly woman with a small dog tucked under her arm. A harried mother with a toddler in a stroller. Normal people, normal lives. The everyday parade of humanity that Marcus had once taken for granted. Jennifer Walsh arrived at exactly 9:00 a.m. She paused at the entrance, scanning the room with the quick, nervous movements of a prey animal. When she spotted Marcus, she hesitated, then walked toward him with the deliberate steps of someone forcing herself forward against every instinct screaming retreat. She was in her late 20s, thin and nervous, with the hunted look of someone who hadn't slept well in a long time. Dark circles under her eyes suggested weeks, maybe months of fear. She clutched her coffee cup like a lifeline. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I wasn't sure you would. You said you had information. I'm listening." "I used to work for a company called Bright Horizons Consulting," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "On the surface, it was a legitimate business, corporate training, team building, that kind of thing. But there was another side. A side I didn't know about until it was too late." "What kind of side?" "They move children, Mr. Cole, across state lines. I thought—" She broke off, her eyes filling with tears. "I thought I was processing normal adoption paperwork. Children who needed homes, families who wanted them. But then I started noticing things. Paperwork that didn't add up. Children whose backgrounds didn't check out. And the man who ran the operation? Whitmore? No, someone higher up, someone I never saw, but whose name I heard whispered. They called him the Architect." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Do you know his real name?" Jennifer shook her head. "No, but I have documents. I've been keeping them, hiding them, for 3 years. I was too scared to come forward before, too scared of what they'd do to me. But when I saw what you did for that little boy, when I saw that someone was willing to stand up," she reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "Everything I have is on here, financial records, names, addresses, routes they used, everything." Marcus took the flash drive, feeling its weight in his palm. Such a small thing to hold so much darkness. Why come to me? Why not the police? Because I don't know who to trust. These people have connections everywhere. Judges, lawyers, even some cops. But you— She looked at him with something like hope. "You're not part of the system, you're not connected to anyone, and you saved that boy without hesitation. That's the kind of person I need." Marcus thought about the implications. If what she was saying was true, this was bigger than one man, bigger than one case. This was a conspiracy that had been operating for years, maybe decades, right under everyone's noses. "I need to take this to Detective Chen," he said. "She's good. I trust her." "Then I trust her too," Jennifer said. "But be careful, Mr. Cole. These people don't like loose ends, and now you're a very visible loose end." She was right. Marcus had been getting strange phone calls, hang-ups in the middle of the night. He'd noticed a car parked on his street that didn't belong to any of his neighbors. Small things, individually meaningless. Together they formed a pattern he recognized. He was being watched. Detective Chen's reaction to the flash drive was immediate and intense. "Holy—" she caught herself, staring at the screen as file after file opened. "Do you know what this is? This is years of evidence. Years. There are names here I recognize from other cases we could never crack. Jennifer Walsh said there's someone at the top. Someone they call the architect. We need to find this person. If we can take them down, the whole network might collapse." "There's something else," Marcus said. "I think I'm being watched. Someone's been monitoring my house." Detective Chen looked at him sharply. "You need protection. I can protect myself. With all due respect, Mr. Cole, these aren't enemy combatants. These are people who operate in shadows, who have resources and connections you can't anticipate. You have a daughter to think about, Maya." The thought of her being caught up in this made Marcus's blood run cold. "What do you suggest?" "Let me put an unmarked car on your street, just as a precaution, and maybe—" she hesitated. "Maybe keep a lower profile for a while. Stop digging. Let us do our jobs." Marcus knew she was right, but he also knew he couldn't just stop. Not when there might be more children out there, more families shattered, more lives destroyed by people who treated children like commodities. "I'll be careful," he said. It was the best he could offer. The weeks that followed were tense. Maya noticed the change in her father, the way he checked the locks twice, the way his eyes swept the street every time they left the house, the way he kept his phone within arm's reach at all times. "Dad, you're scaring me," she said one evening. "What's going on?" Marcus sat her down and told her everything. About the investigation, about the network, about the flash drive and Jennifer Walsh and the mysterious figure called the architect. Maya listened in silence, her face growing paler with each revelation. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to worry you." "I'm worried now." "I know, I'm sorry." Maya was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "What can I do to help? You can be careful. You can pay attention to your surroundings. You can tell me if you see anything unusual. That's not enough. It's what I need from you right now." Maya looked at him, and for a moment Marcus saw not his teenage daughter, but the woman she was becoming. Strong, determined, unwilling to sit on the sidelines while others fought. "Mom wouldn't have sat around doing nothing," she said. The words hit Marcus like a punch. He closed his eyes, remembering his wife, her courage, her conviction, the way she'd never backed down from anything in her life. "Your mother would have done exactly what you're doing," he said. "She would have asked how she could help, and she would have accepted my answer even if she didn't like it, because she understood that sometimes the best way to help is to stay safe." Maya's eyes glistened, but she nodded. "Okay, but promise me you'll be careful too." "I promise." It was a promise Marcus intended to keep, but fate had other plans. The break in the case came from an unexpected source. Rachel Myers called Marcus one morning, her voice urgent. "I need to talk to you, in person." "It's about Tyler." They met at a park near her house, not the one where Tyler had been taken, a different one, farther from the memories. Tyler was in school, and Rachel looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Tyler's been having nightmares," she said. "Every night he wakes up screaming. The therapist says it's normal, that it'll take time, but—" She broke off, taking a shaky breath. "Last night he said something different. He talked about a house." "A house?" "A big house," he said, "with lots of rooms and other children. He said Gerald took him there before he brought him to the grocery store. He said there were other kids there, Mr. Cole, kids who were scared like him." Marcus felt the familiar cold settle into his bones. "Did he say where this house was?" "He doesn't know the address, but he remembers some things. A long driveway, a red barn nearby, a lake you could see from the window. It wasn't much, but it was something." Marcus took the information to Detective Chen, who immediately began cross-referencing properties that matched the description. There were dozens of possibilities in the surrounding counties. "We'll check them all," she said, "but it's going to take time. What if there are kids there right now? Then we'll find them. But I can't get warrants without more evidence, and I can't search properties without warrants. We have to do this by the book, Mr. Cole, or any arrests we make won't stick." Marcus understood the constraints she was working under. He'd operated under rules of engagement himself, knew the frustration of having to hold back when every instinct screamed to act. But he also knew that sometimes rules got people killed. He spent the next few days driving the back roads of the surrounding counties, looking for properties that matched Tyler's description. Long driveway, red barn, lake view. He photographed everything, noted addresses, kept meticulous records. It was tedious work, the kind of work that most people would have found boring. But Marcus had spent years on surveillance missions, had learned to appreciate the slow accumulation of intelligence, the patience required to find a needle in a haystack. He developed a system. Every morning, he'd plot his route on a map, identifying clusters of properties that needed to be checked. He'd drive for hours, sometimes covering 100 miles in a day, stopping to photograph anything that matched even one of Tyler's criteria. Maya asked where he was going every day. He told her he was consulting for the police, which was technically true. He didn't tell her about the long drives, the endless searching, the growing sense that he was closing in on something important. On the fourth day, he found it. The house sat at the end of a winding gravel road, hidden from the main road by a thick stand of trees. Marcus almost missed it. The entrance was unmarked, the mailbox number faded and overgrown with weeds. But something made him slow down, made him take the turn. A red barn stood to the left, paint peeling but still vivid against the grey sky. And behind the house, visible through a gap in the trees, a lake shimmered in the afternoon sun. Marcus's heart began to pound. This was it. He was sure of it. He parked his car a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, using the skills he'd honed over 24 years of service. He moved through the woods like a ghost, silent and unseen, his feet finding the quiet spots instinctively. The house looked abandoned at first glance, windows dark, no cars in the driveway. But as Marcus watched from the tree line, he saw movement, a curtain twitching, a shadow passing behind a window. Someone was inside. He pulled out his phone and called Detective Chen. "I found it. The house Tyler described. Someone's inside." "Where are you? Don't go in, Cole. Wait for backup." "I'm not going anywhere, but hurry." He gave her the address and settled in to wait. Every minute felt like an hour. Every sound made him tense, a bird calling, a branch snapping, the distant rumble of a car engine. The sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees. Marcus adjusted his position, finding a spot where he could see the house clearly while remaining hidden. His knees protested, another gift from decades of hard use, but he ignored them. He thought about Tyler's description of this place. A big house, lots of rooms, other children who were scared. The boy had been here, within these walls, held by people who saw him as nothing more than merchandise. The thought made Marcus's jaw clench. In his years of service, he'd seen the worst of humanity. He'd witnessed atrocities in war zones, had learned that evil wasn't some abstract concept, but a very real force that wore human faces. But there was something particularly monstrous about crimes against children, something that bypassed all his training and hit him on a primal level. These were kids. They should have been playing in backyards, fighting with siblings, complaining about homework. Instead, they were locked in rooms with barred windows, waiting for rescue that might never come. Until now. A light flickered on in an upstairs window. Marcus noted the position, second floor, east side. Someone was up there, someone was moving around. And then he heard something that made his blood freeze. A child crying. The sound came from inside the house, muffled but unmistakable. High-pitched, terrified, hopeless, Marcus's hands clenched into fists. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to move, to storm that house, to do what he'd been trained to do. But Detective Chen's words echoed in his mind. "We have to do this by the book." He stayed in position, watching, listening. The crying continued, then stopped. He heard a voice, adult, male, angry. Then silence. After what felt like an eternity, he heard sirens in the distance, multiple vehicles approaching fast. The curtain in the window twitched again. Then a door slammed open and a man came running out. Not Gerald Whitmore, someone else, younger, faster. Marcus didn't think. He moved. He intercepted the man at the edge of the tree line, taking him down with a tackle that would have made his old instructors proud. The man fought, but Marcus was stronger, better trained. In seconds, he had the man pinned, his arms twisted behind his back. "Police!" Detective Chen's voice rang out. "Everyone freeze!" The next few hours were chaos. The house was surrounded, then searched. Marcus watched from a distance as officers in tactical gear moved in formation, their training evident in every movement. It reminded him of 100 operations he'd been part of. The same tension, the same stakes, the same knowledge that what happened in the next few minutes could mean life or death. The waiting was the hardest part. It always was. He heard shouts from inside the house, muffled and distant, saw officers emerging, escorting adults in handcuffs, saw paramedics rushing in with stretchers and medical equipment, and then he saw the children. They came out one by one, each wrapped in a blanket, each escorted by an officer who spoke to them in soft, reassuring tones. 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, ages 5 to 10. Their eyes were vacant, hollow, the eyes of children who had seen too much. Marcus felt something shatter inside him, something he'd been holding together for decades, through missions and losses, and the slow attrition of hope that came with knowing too much about what humans were capable of. These children, these innocent children. What had been done to them, what might have been done if the network had continued operating, it was unthinkable. And yet it had happened. It was still happening somewhere, to someone. One of the officers approached him. "Mr. Cole, we need you inside. There's something you should see." Inside, the house was a maze of horrors. Not visually. It looked almost normal. A regular farmhouse with regular furniture and regular decorations. But Marcus had been trained to see what wasn't visible. He saw the locks on the bedroom doors, installed on the outside. He saw the bars on the windows, painted to blend with the frames. He saw the soundproofing on the walls, hidden beneath cheerful wallpaper. And he saw the office. The office contained computers, documents, photographs, enough evidence to put away everyone involved for multiple lifetimes. Detective Chen stood in the middle of the room, her face pale but determined. "This is bigger than we thought," she said. "Much bigger." And they found a name, the real name of the architect, Richard Harwood, 62 years old, respected businessman, philanthropist, pillar of the community, the man who ran the largest child trafficking ring in the region. The arrest of Richard Harwood made national news. It was the kind of story that dominated news cycles for weeks. A wealthy businessman, known for his charitable donations and community involvement, revealed to be the mastermind behind a network that had trafficked dozens of children across state lines. The details that emerged during the investigation were horrifying. Harwood had been operating for over 15 years, using his legitimate businesses as cover. He'd cultivated relationships with politicians, law enforcement, and community leaders, building a wall of respectability that had protected him from scrutiny. He'd been careful, methodical, patient. He'd built systems within systems, layers of protection that should have been impenetrable. But he'd made one mistake. He'd underestimated a 7-year-old boy brave enough to whisper 3 words to a stranger. Marcus watched from his living room as reporters detailed the scope of the operation. The dozens of children moved through the network over the years, the web of accomplices stretching across multiple states, the horrifying efficiency of the whole thing. The anchor's voice was grave. Authorities say the investigation is ongoing, with more arrests expected in the coming weeks. The FBI has joined the case, citing potential connections to similar networks in other parts of the country. He should have felt satisfied, vindicated, but all he felt was tired. Maya sat beside him, her hand in his. "You did this," she said. "You stopped them. A lot of people stopped them. Detective Chen, the other officers, Jennifer Walsh for coming forward, Tyler for being brave enough to ask for help. But you were the one who listened. You were the first domino." Marcus thought about that. The first domino, such a small thing really, standing in a grocery store, hearing a child whisper 3 words, "He's not my dad." How many people had walked past before him? How many had seen the boy and the man and thought nothing of it? How many had felt a twinge of unease but pushed it aside, convinced themselves it was none of their business? Marcus had been one moment away from being one of those people. If he'd been in a different aisle, if Tyler hadn't looked at him at exactly the right moment, if 1,000 tiny factors had aligned differently. But they hadn't, and here they were. "There are going to be trials," he said. "Long ones. I'm going to have to testify." "I'll be there," Maya said, "every day if you need me." "You have school. School can wait. This is more important." The trials began 3 months later and lasted the better part of a year. Marcus testified 7 times, once for the main case against Gerald Whitmore, once for the case against Richard Harwood, and 5 more times for various accomplices and co-conspirators. Each time, he sat in the witness box and recounted the events at Henderson's grocery, described what Tyler had said, explained the investigation that followed. The defense attorneys tried everything. They questioned his perception, his memory, his motivations. One particularly aggressive lawyer suggested that Marcus had manufactured the entire incident for attention, for glory, for some sick satisfaction. Marcus had looked at that lawyer, a middle-aged man, in an expensive suit defending a monster for what was undoubtedly a hefty fee, and felt nothing but pity. "I was buying groceries," he said calmly. "A child asked for help, I helped. You expect us to believe it's that simple? I don't expect anything. I'm just telling you what happened." The jury believed him. They believed Tyler too, who testified via video link, his mother holding his hand off screen. The boy was calm, clear, devastating. He described what Gerald Whitmore had told him at the park, how scared he'd been, how he'd spotted Marcus and made a decision that would save his life. "I knew he would help," Tyler said. "I don't know how. I just knew." One by one, the dominoes fell. Gerald Whitmore, Richard Harwood, the accomplices who had helped run the network, the corrupt officials who had looked the other way. By the end of it, over 40 people were convicted on charges ranging from kidnapping to conspiracy to child trafficking. It wasn't justice, Marcus thought. Justice would mean those children had never been taken in the first place. But it was something. It was accountability. It was a message that this would not be tolerated, that there were consequences, that the shadows were not as safe as the monsters believed. Marcus looked at his daughter, 17 years old, fierce and loyal, and so much like her mother. It made his heart ache. "I love you," he said. "You know that, right?" "I know." She leaned into him. "I love you too, Dad." They sat there as the news droned on, as the world outside continued its spin, as the long process of justice began its slow, grinding work. It wasn't over. Marcus knew it wouldn't be over for a long time. There would be more revelations, more names, more stories of children saved and children lost. There would be moments of triumph and moments of despair. But for now, in this moment, sitting with his daughter in the quiet of their home, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the lobby of the county courthouse, waiting. The trials had been brutal, as he'd expected. Days of testimony, of evidence, of watching predators try to wriggle out of the consequences of their actions. Some had taken plea deals, Others had gone to trial and lost. Richard Harwood, the architect himself, had been sentenced to life without parole. Gerald Whitmore, the man who had started it all, had received 40 years. He'd be an old man before he saw the outside of a prison again, if he ever did. Today was different. Today wasn't about justice or punishment. Today was about reunion. Rachel Myers had organized it, a gathering for the families affected by the network, parents who had lost children and found them again, survivors who were slowly rebuilding their lives. She'd asked Marcus to come, and he hadn't been able to refuse. The event was held in the courthouse lobby, a large atrium with marble floors and high windows that let in the afternoon light. Someone had set up tables with refreshments, cookies and coffee and juice boxes for the children. There were balloons, too, bright colors that seemed almost defiant against the weight of what this gathering represented. Marcus stood near the entrance, uncomfortable in his dress shirt and slacks. Maya had insisted he look nice, had straightened his collar and made him promise not to leave early. "These people need to see you," she'd said. "You're important to them." "I don't feel important." "That's exactly why you need to be there." The lobby was filling up now. Marcus recognized some faces from the news, from trial proceedings, from the long months of investigation. Parents holding children they'd thought they'd never see again. Children who were older now, changed in ways that couldn't be undone, but could perhaps be healed. There were therapists here too, child psychologists and trauma specialists who had volunteered their services, social workers who had helped families navigate the complicated aftermath of rescue, teachers who had welcomed traumatized children back into their classrooms. It took a village, Marcus realized, not just to raise a child, but to save one, to heal one. Tyler Myers ran up to him, all energy and motion. He was 8 now, taller than he'd been in the grocery store, with the same sandy hair and the same eyes, but different, lighter, less haunted. "Mr. Marcus." Tyler threw his arms around Marcus's waist. "Mom said you might not come, but I knew you would." "I knew it." Marcus hugged the boy back, feeling the solid reality of him. Alive, safe, home. "I wouldn't miss this for anything," he said. Rachel approached, tears already streaming down her face. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. I wanted everyone to be here, everyone who helped bring our children home." The ceremony was simple. There were speeches, but not too many. There were tears, but also laughter. Children played together, some of them meeting for the first time, bonded by an experience none of them should have had to endure. Detective Chen was there, along with other officers who had worked the case. Jennifer Walsh sat in a corner, still nervous in crowds, but smiling more than she had before. Even the mayor made an appearance, shaking hands and taking photos. At one point, a woman Marcus didn't recognize approached him. She was holding the hand of a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with bright red hair and a shy smile. The woman looked nervous, uncertain, like she'd been working up the courage to approach for some time. "You're Marcus Cole," the woman said. It wasn't a question. I'm Amanda Reeves. This is my daughter, Sophie," the woman's voice caught. "Sophie was one of the children in the house, the one you found." Marcus looked at the little girl, remembering the crying he'd heard through the walls, the child whose sobs had almost made him abandon all caution and storm the building. She looked healthier now than she must have looked then. There was color in her cheeks, a brightness in her eyes that spoke of healing. "Hi, Sophie," he said gently. Sophie waved, hiding half behind her mother's leg. Amanda took a shaky breath. "I wrote you a letter, about 100 letters, actually. I could never find the words. How do you thank someone for—" She couldn't finish, overcome by emotion. Marcus waited, giving her time. "Sophie was missing for 3 weeks, Amanda finally continued. 3 weeks. Do you know what that's like? 21 days of not knowing if your child is alive or dead. 21 days of imagining the worst. 21 days of hoping and praying and bargaining with a God you weren't even sure you believed in anymore. I can't imagine," Marcus said honestly. No, you can't. No one can, unless they've lived it. Amanda wiped her eyes. When the police called and said they'd found her, I collapsed. I literally collapsed. My husband had to catch me. I thought they were calling to tell me she was dead. I'd prepared myself for that. I'd started to accept it, even. She looked at her daughter, fresh tears streaming. But she wasn't dead. She was alive. Because you found that house. Because you didn't give up. Because a little boy in a grocery store asked for help and you actually listened. You don't have to thank me, Marcus said. Just take care of her. That's all the thanks I need. I will. Every day for the rest of my life, every single day, I will wake up grateful that she's here, that she's safe, that she has a future. Amanda knelt down to Sophie's level. Sophie, this is the man who helped find you. Remember what you wanted to say. Sophie stepped forward, still shy, and held out a piece of paper. A drawing done in crayon, a stick figure in blue, standing next to a house with a big yellow sun overhead. That's you, she said. You're the helper man. Marcus took the drawing, his throat tight. This is beautiful, Sophie. I'm going to hang it on my refrigerator. Sophie beamed, and for a moment all the darkness of the past months faded away. All that was left was a little girl's smile and a crayon drawing, and the simple, profound truth that some things in this world were still worth fighting for. Maya appeared at his elbow. Dad, there are some reporters outside. They want to talk to you. Marcus looked at the drawing in his hands. Tell them I'm busy. They'll wait. Let them. Maya studied her father for a moment. She was wearing her college sweatshirt, the one from the campus visit they'd taken last spring. It seemed like a lifetime ago now, walking those tree-lined paths, imagining her future, before any of this had happened. Are you okay? She asked. Really okay. I'm getting there. The therapy's helping? It is. The nightmares are less frequent. The hypervigilance is, he paused, searching for the right word, manageable. And the rest of it? The guilt? Marcus looked at his daughter, surprised. He shouldn't have been. She'd always been more perceptive than he gave her credit for. Even as a child, she'd known when something was bothering him, had known how to pull him out of the dark places his mind sometimes went. I don't know if the guilt ever goes away, he admitted. I keep thinking about the children we didn't save, the ones who were lost before anyone started paying attention, the ones who are still out there waiting for someone to notice. But you did save some. You saved Tyler. You saved the 4 kids in that house. You helped bring down an entire network. It doesn't feel like enough. Maya took his hand. It never will. That's not how this works. You don't do it because it feels like enough. You do it because it's the right thing to do. Because someone has to. Because if you don't, who will? Marcus looked at her, this young woman who had somehow grown up while he wasn't paying attention. When did you get so smart? I've always been this smart. You just weren't paying attention. He laughed, a genuine laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep. You're right, I wasn't, but I'm paying attention now. Good. She squeezed his hand. Now come on, there are about 100 people in there who want to thank you, and you're going to stand there and let them. No running away. No pretending to be busy. Just accept it, okay? Okay. He folded the drawing carefully and put it in his pocket, next to his heart. Then he walked back into the crowd, back to the families and children and the messy, beautiful work of healing. He'd spent decades being a warrior, fighting in places most people would never see, doing things most people would never know about. He'd been good at it, maybe too good. There had been a time when he'd wondered if that was all he was, a weapon, a tool, something forged for violence and nothing else. After his wife died, after the grief that had nearly consumed him, he'd questioned whether he could ever be anything else. Maya had saved him then. His daughter, with her stubborn refusal to let him retreat into himself, with her demands for breakfast and homework help, and all the mundane requirements of parenthood. She'd given him a reason to keep going when he'd lost the will to fight. And now, standing in this courthouse lobby surrounded by families who had been torn apart and put back together, he understood something he hadn't before. The fighting wasn't over, it had just changed form. Every parent who hugged their child a little tighter tonight, every teacher who looked a little more carefully at the children in their class, every stranger who paid attention when something seemed wrong, they were all part of the same fight, the endless, quiet, everyday battle to keep children safe. But this, he realized, was different. This wasn't about combat or missions or strategic objectives. This was about connection, about showing up, about listening when a child whispered for help. Anyone could be a hero, he thought. You didn't need special training or special skills. You just needed to pay attention, to care, to act when action was needed. He thought about all the people who had played a part in bringing down the network, the police officers who had worked countless hours, the prosecutors who had built airtight cases, the social workers who were helping children heal, the parents who had never given up hope, and Tyler, a 7-year-old boy who had been brave enough to speak up even when he was terrified, who had looked at a stranger in a grocery store and asked for help. That was the real heroism, Marcus thought. Not his actions, but Tyler's. A child who had every reason to stay silent, who had been threatened and scared and alone, and who had still found the courage to reach out. The trials were over, but the story wasn't. There were still children out there, still predators in the shadows, still work to be done. Marcus had started consulting with law enforcement agencies, sharing his expertise, helping to train officers to recognize the signs he'd seen that day in the grocery store. Maya was thinking about pursuing criminal justice in college, inspired by everything she'd witnessed. The ripples were spreading. One act of courage, Tyler's, not his, had set in motion a chain of events that had brought down an entire criminal network and freed dozens of children. That was how change happened, Marcus realized. Not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through small acts of bravery, multiplied and magnified until they became unstoppable. As the sun set on the courthouse, casting long shadows across the lobby, Marcus felt a hand slip into his. Maya stood beside him, watching the families filter out into the evening. "Ready to go home?" she asked. Marcus looked around one more time, at Tyler running in circles with other children, at Rachel talking with other parents, at the dozens of people whose lives had intersected with his in the most unexpected way. "Yeah," he said, "I'm ready." They walked out into the fading light, father and daughter, leaving the courthouse behind. But the work would continue. The vigilance, the paying attention, the willingness to act when action was needed. Because somewhere out there, another child might be whispering for help, and Marcus Cole intended to be listening. A year later, Marcus received an envelope in the mail with no return address. He almost threw it away. He'd been getting strange mail since the story went viral, some from well-wishers, some from cranks, some from people who wanted to share their own stories of loss and hope. Most of it he couldn't bear to read, but something about this envelope made him pause. It was small, addressed in careful, childish handwriting. No stamps. It had been hand-delivered, dropped in his mailbox sometime during the night. He opened it at the kitchen table, Maya already gone to her morning classes at the community college. The coffee machine gurgled in the background. Outside, a lawnmower hummed somewhere down the street. Inside was a letter written in a child's careful handwriting. "Dear Mr. Marcus, my mom says I should write this letter to you for homework, but also because I want to. I'm in 3rd grade now. I like math and reading, and I have a dog named Buster. He's brown and has one ear that sticks up. I still think about that day at the grocery store sometimes. But now, when I think about it, I don't feel as scared. My therapist says that's because I have good memories too now. Like the memory of you standing there and not letting him take me. Like the memory of seeing my mom at the police station. Mom says you changed our lives. I think that's true. But I think I changed my life too, when I decided to ask for help. Mom says that was really brave. She says you said that too. I want to be like you when I grow up. Not a soldier, but someone who helps people. Maybe a firefighter or a doctor or a teacher, someone who pays attention when other people need help. Thank you for paying attention to me. Your friend, Tyler Myers, P.S. I drew you a picture of Buster. I hope you like dogs." Marcus read the letter 3 times, his vision blurring with tears he didn't bother to wipe away. The drawing was on a separate piece of paper, a brown dog with lopsided ears and a big smile, surrounded by grass and flowers and a yellow sun. He sat there for a long time, holding that letter and that drawing, feeling the weight of what they represented. A child who had been through hell and come out the other side. A family that had been nearly destroyed and had somehow found their way back. A future that had almost been stolen, now stretching out bright and full of possibility. This was why he'd done what he'd done, not for recognition or gratitude or any sense of personal accomplishment, but for this, for Tyler and his mother and his dog with one ear that sticks up, for the chance at a normal life, a happy life, a life filled with homework and pets and dreams of the future. He carefully folded the letter and added it to the box in his closet where he kept his most important memories. His wife's wedding ring, Maya's first drawings, the flag from his retirement ceremony, the challenge coin his team had given him on his last deployment. The drawing of Buster went on the refrigerator, right next to Sophie's crayon artwork. That night, when Maya came home from her first year of college for a visit, she found her father sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "Dad, everything okay?" Marcus looked up at her and smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "Everything's great," he said. "I got a letter from Tyler today." "Tyler? That's amazing." "What did he say?" Marcus told her about the letter, about Buster the dog with one ear that sticks up, about Tyler wanting to be someone who helps people. Maya sat down across from him, her eyes shining. "You did that, Dad. You made him believe that one person can make a difference." "He did that himself," Marcus said. "I just showed up. Showing up matters." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, thinking about all the moments in his life when someone had shown up for him. His parents, his teammates, his wife, his daughter. "It does." They sat in comfortable silence as the evening darkened around them, father and daughter, connected by love and shared history and the unspoken understanding that some bonds went deeper than words. Outside, the world continued its spin. Children played in yards, and parents worried about homework, and strangers passed each other on streets, each carrying their own stories. And somewhere, in a grocery store or a park or a school playground, a child who needed help might be gathering the courage to speak up. Because of what had happened, because of Tyler's bravery and Marcus's action and the chain of events that followed, maybe, just maybe, someone would be listening. That was the lesson, Marcus realized. Not that one person could save the world, but that one person could save one person, and that one person could save another, and so on, until the darkness receded and the light grew stronger. It started with listening, with paying attention, with taking that first small step. It started with a whisper in a grocery store. "He's not my dad." 3 words that had changed everything. 3 words that had proven once and for all that courage had no age limit, and that sometimes the smallest voices could spark the biggest changes. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here, the years of training, the decades of service, the missions that had taken him to the darkest corners of the world. He'd seen humanity at its worst, the violence, the cruelty, the casual disregard for life that some people seemed capable of, but he'd also seen humanity at its best. The soldier who threw himself on a grenade to save his teammates, the medic who worked for hours to save a dying child, the translator who risked everything to help them navigate hostile territory, and now a 7-year-old boy who had found the courage to ask a stranger for help. That was the thread that connected everything, Marcus realized. Courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The choice to do something when doing nothing would have been so much easier. Tyler had made that choice, and because he had, other children were safe, other families were whole. The predators were behind bars, one small voice, one whispered plea, one act of trust. That was all it had taken to change everything. Marcus Cole, retired Navy SEAL, father of one, accidental hero, sat in his kitchen as night fell around him, surrounded by crayon drawings and dog pictures, and the evidence of a life well lived. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked. Outside, the neighborhood settled into the quiet rhythms of evening, sprinklers hissing, dogs barking, children being called home for dinner. Normal life. The life he'd spent decades fighting to protect without ever fully understanding what he was fighting for. He understood now. He was at peace. And somewhere out there, Tyler Myers was doing his homework, petting his dog, dreaming of the person he would become. The future was unwritten, but it was bright. Marcus stood up from the table, his joints protesting as they always did these days. He walked to the window and looked out at the night sky, at the stars that had witnessed humanity's struggles since the beginning of time. Somewhere out there, in some other city, some other grocery store, some other ordinary moment, another child might be gathering the courage to ask for help. Another predator might be reaching for an innocent victim. Another bystander might be deciding whether to get involved or look the other way. He hoped they would choose to listen. He hoped they would choose to act. He hoped they would remember that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. That was Tyler's legacy. That was the lesson a 7-year-old boy had taught the world. Ask for help. Believe someone will answer. And when you can, be the one who answers. Marcus smiled, thinking of Elena, of what she would say if she could see him now. She'd probably laugh and tell him he was getting soft in his old age. She'd probably cry and tell him she was proud. She'd probably be right on both counts. "Dad?" Maya's voice came from the doorway. "You okay?" "Yeah," Marcus said, turning from the window. "I'm okay. You want some hot chocolate?" "Hot?" "I'm making some." "That sounds perfect." They walked to the kitchen together, father and daughter, leaving the darkness outside where it belonged. And that was enough. That was more than enough.